Okay, let's start. Number 1. The Sunday. You're reading a text that almost nobody in the Western world has seen. It survived in Old Church Slavonic, copied across Russia and the Balkans, and its Jewish core dates to the 1st century CE. It's called 2 Enoch, and it claims to be the first-hand account of a man who walked through 10 heavens, each one mapped to a planet, and wrote down everything he saw. The Book of Enoch you've heard of is about fallen angels. That's 1 Enoch. This is the other one, and the other one has blueprints for every planet in the system. When Enoch reaches the 4th level, the heaven assigned to the sun, he doesn't find light, he finds creatures. The text calls them phoenixes and chalkidri, and what it describes is not symbolic. They are 900 measures in size. They have the head of a crocodile, the feet and tail of a lion, 12 wings each, and their skin is colored like the rainbow, described specifically as empurpled. That reads like a spec sheet, not mythology. Head of a crocodile, feet of a lion, 12 wings, rainbow coloration. Every physical feature is named and counted. These creatures sing at dawn. According to the text, their song is what signals the sun to begin its course across the sky, and they accompany the sun's chariot on its daily path. Think about that for a second. The sun doesn't move on its own in this system. It moves because 900-measure rainbow creatures with crocodile heads sing it into motion every morning. The entire solar mechanism in 2 Enoch is biological. Living things run the sky. And the staffing numbers are specific. 15,000 angels attend the sun during the day. 1,000 attend it at night. The text calls the daytime contingent 15 myriads, and it breaks the operation down by shift. Day crew, night crew, handoff at dawn, handoff at dusk. The sun enters and exits through specific numbered gates on the eastern and western horizons, and the entire mechanism is mapped with architectural precision. Entry points, exit points, courses, schedules, personnel counts. This is not a prayer describing how the sun feels. This is an operations manual describing how the sun runs. Here's the detail that everyone missed for centuries. The text doesn't treat the sun as the center of anything. In 2 Enoch's system, the sun sits on the 4th heavenly circle, not the 1st, not the highest. It's the middle ring in a 7-ring orbital system, where each ring carries its own planet, and every planet has its own heaven and its own inhabitants. 7 planets are named in 2 Enoch chapter 30 using Greek-derived forms: Chrono for Saturn, Aphrodite for Venus, Eris for Mars, Zeus for Jupiter, Hermes for Mercury, and the moon on the lowest ring. The sun sits dead center. 7 planets, 7 circles, 7 heavens built around them. That order doesn't match modern astronomy. It doesn't match the standard Ptolemaic model either. Saturn on the outermost ring, Venus directly below it, Mars below Venus, the sun in the middle, Jupiter below the sun, Mercury below Jupiter, and the moon at the bottom. That doesn't match Copernicus or Ptolemy or anything else on record, and the text doesn't explain where the ordering came from. It just states it as fact. But the 7 planets are only the mechanical layer. Above them, 3 more heavens extend further, each one populated by something that is not a planet at all. The entire cosmos in this text is a 10-story building with a planet on every floor. The sun is on floor 4, 3 planets below it, 3 heavens above the last planet, and creatures and structures and operations running on all of them simultaneously. The phoenixes and chalkidri on the sun's level are not unique. They're one department in a system that has departments on every planet. If you're wondering what kind of biology those creatures are supposed to describe, so is every scholar who's read it. The chalkidri appear in no other ancient text. The name itself has no clear etymology. One proposed etymology traces the name to a Greek root meaning bronze serpent, another to a Hebrew compound, and none of the proposals explain why a 1st century Jewish author would invent a creature with exactly those features, exactly that size, doing exactly that job. The phoenixes at least have parallels in Egyptian and Greek mythology, but in those traditions, the phoenix is a single bird that burns and regenerates. In 2 Enoch, there are multiple phoenixes. They don't burn, and their job is pulling the sun across the sky while singing. Same name, completely different creature, completely different function. The question isn't whether phoenixes and chalkidri are real animals. The question is why a 1st century Jewish text would describe the sun's heaven with the specificity of an engineering diagram. Why creatures with exactly 12 wings, exactly crocodile heads, exactly lion feet would be stationed there, singing on a schedule, running a machine. And why 15,000 angels would be assigned to the day shift, while only 1,000 cover the night. That was written sometime in the 1st century. Almost 2,000 years later, scholars are still trying to figure out what these creatures were supposed to be. But the story doesn't end with the Sunday. The sun sits on the 4th circle, the highest circle. The planet at the very top of the entire orbital system belongs to something most people wouldn't guess. Number 2. Saturn. The highest planet in 2 Enoch's orbital system is Saturn. Not Jupiter, not the Sunday Saturn. The text calls it Kruno, a Slavonic rendering of the Greek Kronos, and it sits on the first and outermost ring of the 7 planetary circles described in Chapter 30. Every other planet orbits below it. That placement tells you something immediately about how this cosmology works. In every Greek and Roman astronomical model that survived antiquity, the ordering of the planets follows a logic tied to their observed motion across the sky. The slower a planet moves against the background stars, the further out it sits. Saturn is the slowest visible planet, so in Ptolemaic astronomy it occupies the outermost sphere. But 2 Enoch isn't using Ptolemaic ordering. Not exactly. In Ptolemy's model, the planets run Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn from inside to outside. In 2 Enoch, the planets run Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, Mars, Venus, Saturn. Venus sits directly below Saturn on the 2nd ring, Mars on the 3rd, the Sun in the middle on the 4th, Jupiter drops to the 5th, Mercury to the 6th, the Moon at the bottom on the 7th. Nobody talks about this part. The planetary ordering in 2 Enoch doesn't match any known ancient astronomical tradition precisely. Not Ptolemy, not Aristotle, not the Babylonian sequence, not the Egyptian decans. It shares Saturn's outermost position with Ptolemy, but rearranges every planet between Saturn and the Moon into a pattern no other surviving source uses. And the text offers no derivation. No argument for why Saturn belongs on top. No astronomical observations to justify Venus in 2nd place. The ordering is presented as revealed truth, shown to Enoch during his ascent, not reasoned from evidence. Someone showed him the planets and told him how they were arranged. That's the claim. And the names are worth stopping on. Kruno, Aphrodite, Eris, Zeus, Hermes. These are not Hebrew names. These are not Slavonic names. These are Greek names transliterated through centuries of Slavonic manuscript copying, and they point backward to a version of this text that circulated in Greek before the Slavonic translations were made. The Jewish core of 2 Enoch was likely written in Greek or possibly Hebrew in 1st century Alexandria or the Jewish diaspora, and the planetary names are one of the strongest clues. A Hebrew author in a Greek-speaking community borrowing Greek divine names for the planets and placing them on an orbital system that doesn't match Greek astronomy. The names come from Greece. The ordering comes from somewhere else. Here's what makes the placement significant beyond astronomy. Kronos, in Greek mythology, is the Titan who ruled before Zeus, the father who devoured his own children, the lord of time, who was eventually overthrown and imprisoned in Tartarus. The Romans identified him with Saturn, associated him with agriculture, cycles, and a golden age before the current order of the gods. In every tradition that touches his name, Kronos Saturn is the old ruler, the displaced power, the one who came first and was pushed aside. 2 Enoch puts that figure at the outermost boundary of the planetary system, the ceiling of the physical cosmos, the last ring before the heavens that contains something other than planets. And what's above Saturn's ring is not another planet. The 8th, 9th, and 10th heavens in 2 Enoch carry names that don't correspond to any visible celestial body: Muzaloth, Cuchaveim, and Aravoth. Those 3 are the superstructure above the planets, the administrative heavens where the constellations are governed, the zodiac is housed, and God's throne sits. Saturn is the boundary between the planets and the governance layer above them. The old displaced ruler standing guard at the door between the physical cosmos and whatever comes next. The text doesn't say what lives on Saturn specifically. No creatures are named for the outermost planet, the way phoenixes and chalky dry are named for the Sunday. What Saturn gets instead is position, the highest orbit, the outermost wall. The last planet before the cosmos stops being about planets and starts being about something else. Saturn at the top, the Moon at the bottom, and the Sun stuck in the middle. Nobody in the ancient world published this ordering. Nobody in the modern world has explained it. And the same ordering system that puts Saturn highest also puts Venus directly below it. What 2 Enoch says is living on Venus, the planet directly under Saturn, is the opposite of everything that name has ever meant. Number 3. Venus. The planet named for love and beauty sits on the second heavenly circle in 2 Enoch's system. Its Greek name in the text is Aphrodite. And the heaven built around this planet is a place of total darkness, filled with prisoners hanging in chains. Enoch arrives at the second heaven and finds no light at all. The text describes complete, suffocating blackness. Inside that darkness, rebel angels who joined Satan's original rebellion are suspended in chains, awaiting a judgment that has not yet come and shows no sign of arriving. They have been there since before human history began. They will be there until the end of it. The text gives no count of how many are imprisoned, just the image, bodies hanging in darkness, in silence, for a duration the text describes as indefinite. That's the setup. Venus, the planet cultures across the ancient world associated with beauty, desire, and the goddess of love, mapped in this text to a prison so dark the narrator can barely describe what he's seeing. What comes next is the part that still doesn't make sense. When Enoch passes through this heaven, the imprisoned angels recognize him. They know who he is, and they beg. The text says they plead with Enoch to pray for them, to intercede on their behalf before God, to ask for some reduction of their sentence. These are not mindless prisoners. They are conscious, articulate beings who understand their situation, know they were wrong, and are desperate enough to ask a human being walking through their prison for help. A human passing through is apparently a rare enough event that they treat it as their only chance. Think about that framing for a second. In most religious traditions, angels outrank humans. They are closer to God, more powerful, more knowing. But in this scene, the relationship is inverted. The imprisoned angels are below Enoch. They need something from him that they cannot get themselves. He is the one with access to the throne room they can no longer reach. The text is telling you that rank in this system is not fixed. Angels can fall. A human being can ascend past them. The hierarchy moves, and it moves in both directions. Which, looking back, makes the choice of Venus for this heaven either a stroke of deliberate symbolic architecture or one of the most precise coincidences in ancient literature. In Babylonian astronomy, Venus was Ishtar, the goddess of war and sex. In Greek tradition, Aphrodite was born from violence, from the severed body of Uranos thrown into the sea. The morning star and the evening star were understood in many ancient traditions as the same object appearing twice under different names. And in the Hebrew Bible, the morning star is the title applied to the fallen angel himself. Isaiah chapter 14 uses the phrase Helel ben Shachar, which the Latin Vulgate rendered as Lucifer, the light bringer, the bright one who fell. Venus is the Lucifer planet, and 2 Enoch puts the Lucifer story's inmates, the rebel angels who fell with Satan, on Venus. The planet whose name means the bright one, the same title given to the leader of the rebellion, assigned to the heaven where the rebels are chained in darkness. Whatever brightness they had is gone. And the planet they're chained to still carries the name of the bright one who led them there. Here's what makes the structure uncomfortable. This is only the second planet. Enoch is 2 levels up in a 10-level system, and he's already walking through a prison for cosmic war criminals. The text doesn't ease you in. It doesn't give you 3 planets of beauty before introducing the horror. The moon's heaven is weather angels and star governors. Venus is chained rebels in absolute darkness. The escalation from the first planet to the second is total. And the text treats it as architecture, not drama. This is just what's on Venus. The system has 8 more levels, and the author moves through them with the same tone you'd use describing the layout of a government building. Here's the weather department. Here's the prison wing. Next planet. The connection between Venus and the imprisoned angels also ties 2 Enoch to a much older tradition. In 1 Enoch, the better-known Book of Enoch, the fallen angels are called Watchers, and their crime is descending to earth, mating with human women, and producing giants called Nephilim. In 2 Enoch, the imprisoned angels on Venus are identified as their companions, the ones who didn't descend to earth but still sided with the rebellion. The ones on this planet chose wrong but didn't go as far. They picked the losing side and got frozen in place, unable to fall further, unable to return, suspended. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe, because what's living on the other 7 planets gets stranger from here. What Enoch found on Mars is something that shouldn't be possible in a single architectural space. If Enoch had stopped at Venus, this would be a story about punishment. But Venus was just the prison wing. Mars is where the architecture breaks its own rules. Number 4. Mars. Mars is split down the middle. One half is paradise. The other half is a place of frozen torment, with a river of fire running through it. Both halves exist on the same planet, in the same heaven, separated by what the text implies is nothing more than a boundary. Mars sits on the third heavenly circle, Eris, the god of war, and the planet mapped to that name is a place at war with itself. The northern region is paradise. The text describes it with the kind of specificity that runs through the entire book, not poetic gestures but inventory. At the center stands the tree of life. 300 angels guard it. The tree produces every fruit, and its fragrance reaches across the entire planet. 4 springs flow from its roots. 1 carries milk, 1 carries honey, 1 carries wine, 1 carries oil. And the roots themselves extend downward, through the levels below, all the way to the Garden of Eden on Earth. I mean, think about that for a second. The Garden of Eden in this text is not the third heaven. The Garden of Eden is on Earth. What's in the third heaven is the root system of the tree that feeds it. The third heaven is the infrastructure. Eden is the ground floor. The tree in paradise is the plumbing that makes the garden work. That image alone rewrites the standard reading of Genesis. In the Genesis account, the Garden of Eden is a place on Earth with a tree in it. In 2 Enoch, the garden is just the ground-level output of a tree rooted 3 planets above it. The tree is a vertical structure spanning multiple levels of the cosmos, anchored on Mars and extending its canopy down to the terrestrial surface. Eden isn't where the system starts. It's where the system ends up. The 4 rivers in Genesis, Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, map onto the 4 springs in 2 Enoch's third heaven: milk, honey, wine, and oil. The number matches. The function matches. What doesn't match is the direction. Genesis describes 4 rivers flowing out of Eden. 2 Enoch describes 4 springs flowing down from the third heaven through the root system. Same rivers, reverse direction, suggesting that whoever wrote 2 Enoch either reinterpreted Genesis or was working from a parallel source that Genesis had already simplified. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains the structure of everything above it. The same heaven, the same floor, also contains a place of punishment. The text shifts without warning from paradise to its opposite. In the southern region of the third heaven, Enoch finds a terrible place of icy, frozen darkness. A river of fire flows through it. Cruel angels armed with weapons patrol the space, and their job is torture. The condemned are held here permanently, and the text describes the suffering in terms that match later Christian and Islamic descriptions of hell more closely than anything in the Hebrew Bible. 2 things exist on the same planet: a paradise so complete it feeds the Garden of Eden, and a punishment zone so severe it runs on fire and ice simultaneously. The text doesn't explain how both occupy the same planet. It doesn't describe a wall or a gate or a passage between them. It simply presents both as facts of Mars's architecture and moves on. Mars is the planet the Romans named for the god of war. Eris is the Greek form, and 2 Enoch places that planet on the one level where opposing forces coexist without resolution. Neither side wins on Mars. Paradise and punishment share the same planet, permanently, with no resolution. The war on Mars is built into the floor plan. The 300 guardian angels stationed in the paradise region are there permanently. They don't rotate. They don't leave. 300 beings assigned to protect one tree from a threat the text never names but clearly considers serious enough to require a standing army. What's on the other side of that boundary that requires 300 permanent guards? But this wasn't just about one planet anymore. The deeper Enoch went, the bigger the architecture got. And the level at the very top of the system, above every planet, the 10th heaven called Aravoth, is where the whole system has its center of gravity. Number 5. Aravoth. The 10th heaven, the ceiling of the entire system. The name comes from Hebrew, and in later Jewish tradition it becomes the standard term for the highest heaven, the one where God's presence resides. But 2 Enoch doesn't describe a residence. It describes an encounter so intense that the person who walks into it comes out as a different species. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. When Enoch reaches the 10th heaven, the angels who have been escorting him through each level stop. They can go no further. They leave him at the edge, and what he sees next is described in the text with a kind of overwhelmed specificity that reads like someone trying to write down what happened before the memory fades. He sees the face of God. The text describes it as like iron made to glow in fire and brought out, emitting sparks, and it burns. That's not a metaphor about spiritual warmth. That's a physical description of superheated metal. Glowing, sparking, radiating heat. The face of God, in 2 Enoch, looks like an industrial process. Surrounding the throne are cherubim and seraphim in constant worship. The text describes ranks of beings arranged in concentric formations, their song continuous, their positions fixed. The 10th heaven in this text is not peaceful. It's intense. The light alone is described as nearly unbearable. And Enoch, a human being standing in a space designed for beings of an entirely different order, should not be able to survive it. And no, I'm not making that up. The text says exactly that. Enoch falls on his face. He cannot stand in the presence. And then God does something the text treats as the pivotal moment of the entire ascent. God tells the archangel, identified in some manuscripts as Vrevoil and in others as a figure closer to Gabriel, to bring Enoch books. Not a book, books. The text says 366 books containing the secrets of creation, the structure of the cosmos, the history of everything that has been and everything that will be. 366 volumes. That number matches the days in a leap year, which in the calendar system 2 Enoch describes is the correct solar year length. The number of books equals the number of days. Whether that's coincidence or encoding, the text doesn't say. The archangel dictates to Enoch for 30 days and 30 nights without stopping. Enoch writes everything down, the entire structure of the 10 heavens, the mechanics of the planetary circles, the operations of the angels, the future history of the world, the laws of creation. Every piece of the architecture he walked through on the way up, plus everything he couldn't see from inside the system. The 30-day dictation is treated in the text as the central event, the reason Enoch was brought through the heavens in the first place. The entire tour of every planet was just set up. The books were the reason Enoch was brought up there in the first place. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't, because after the dictation, God does something to Enoch that the text describes in terms no other ancient text uses for a living human being. Enoch is transformed. His flesh is anointed with a substance the text describes as light itself. His body changes. His appearance becomes, the text says, like the appearance of the angels around him. Nobody explains divinity to him. The text says he was physically changed into something closer to the beings around him. A human being physically altered at the cellular level by proximity to the throne. No other figure in the Hebrew Bible or its surrounding literature gets this. Moses sees the burning bush. Elijah rides a chariot of fire. Isaiah sees the throne room. But none of them are physically changed by the experience. Enoch alone enters as a man and leaves as something else. The text calls it transformation. Later Jewish mystical tradition calls it metatronization, the process by which Enoch becomes Metatron, the lesser YHWH, the angel who sits on a throne of his own in the 7th heaven and administers the cosmos. That tradition comes from 3 Enoch, a later text, but the root of it is here, in 2 Enoch's 10th heaven scene. Here's what makes this section structurally important. Aravoth is not just the highest heaven in the cosmology, it's the control room. Everything below it, every angel, every creature, every planet, every storehouse of snow, and every prison of darkness reports upward to this level. The phoenixes and Chalkidri sing to move the sun because the sun's operations are administered from Aravoth. The imprisoned angels on Venus hang in chains because the judgment comes from here. The 300 guardian angels at the Tree of Life on Mars guard it because the tree's roots connect to a system whose center of gravity is in this room. Every planet is a department. This level is the executive suite. And the books Enoch received are the system documentation. 366 volumes describing how all of it works, why it was built, what it's for. The text claims Enoch brought those books back to Earth and gave them to his sons before his final ascension. Whether those books survived, where they went, and whether any portion of them became part of the texts we now call Scripture, 2 Enoch does not say. Aravoth is the top, but between the top and the planets below, there's a level filled with beings who used to stand where Enoch was standing. They had access to this room. They chose to leave, and their silence has lasted longer than most civilizations on Earth. Number 6. Jupiter. The 5th heaven is a place of silence. These are beings who could speak and have chosen not to. That silence has been going on for longer than any civilization on Earth has lasted. And this is the part where things stopped being funny. The text calls them the Grigori. That's the Greek word for watchers, the same title used in 1 Enoch for the angels who descended to Earth, married human women, and produced the Nephilim. But the Grigori, in 2 Enoch's fifth heaven, are not the ones who descended. These are the ones who stayed. They sided with the rebellion but didn't go as far as their brothers, and now they occupy a heaven that reads like the waiting room for a verdict that never comes. Their appearance is described as human, but their size exceeds the giants. Their faces are withered. Their lips are silent. The text says they stand in perpetual mourning, not because they were condemned to mourn, but because they chose the wrong side and understand it. They are not being punished the way the angels on Venus are punished. They are not hanging in chains. They are standing in the open, on a planet that is described as grim but not dark, and they have chosen silence, voluntary silence from beings who once sang in God's presence. Enoch tries to talk to them. The text describes him encouraging the Grigori, urging them to resume their worship, to stop mourning and return to their duties. Some of them respond. The text implies that Enoch's visit has an effect, that some of the watchers begin singing again after hearing him. But the text doesn't say all of them respond. The image it leaves you with is a heaven populated by giant silent figures, some of whom have been standing motionless for longer than human civilization has existed, and a human walking among them trying to get them to sing. You'd think someone would have said something. Nobody did. Jupiter sits on the fifth heavenly circle in 2 Enoch's system. Zeus, the Slavonic form of Zeus, king of the Greek gods, ruler of Olympus, the figure who overthrew his father Kronos Saturn. And 2 Enoch maps the king of the gods to a planet full of dethroned soldiers who backed the wrong ruler. The parallel is almost too precise. Zeus overthrew Kronos. The Grigori backed Satanael over God. Both stories are about a rebellion in the ranks, and in both stories Jupiter is defined by which side of the rebellion he fell on. In Greek myth, Zeus won. On the planet Jupiter in 2 Enoch, the inhabitants lost. Here's the connection that ties Jupiter to Venus's prison 2 levels below. The Grigori on Jupiter are described as the brothers of the angels imprisoned on Venus. Same rebellion, different outcomes. The ones on Venus went further, fell harder, and ended up in chains. The ones on Jupiter held back, didn't descend fully, and ended up standing in silent mourning instead of hanging in darkness. Same war, 2 planets, 2 sentencing tiers. That structural detail tells you something about how the 10-planet system works. It's not arranged by rank alone, it's arranged by consequence. Each planet doesn't just house different beings. It houses different outcomes of the same events. The faithful angels serve across multiple levels. The rebels who fell all the way hang on Venus. The rebels who fell partway stand on Jupiter. And the human who remained loyal gets walked through all of it and shown the control room at the top. The 10 heavens are arranged by what happened to whoever lives there. Faithful angels on one planet, partial rebels on another, full rebels below them. It's a sentencing system. The Grigori's connection to 1 Enoch is what makes them recognizable to anyone who's studied the broader Enoch literature. In 1 Enoch, the Watchers descend to Mount Hermon, take human wives, and teach humanity forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, cosmetics, weapons, astrology, sorcery. Their children, the Nephilim, are giants who terrorize the earth until God sends the flood. The Grigori in 2 Enoch's fifth heaven are the ones who watched that happen from above and chose not to participate but also chose not to stop it. They are the bystanders of the cosmic rebellion, and their punishment is to stand in their own silence, knowing what they allowed, for as long as the system runs. The silence of the Grigori would come back later in the broader Enoch tradition, but that's getting ahead of the story. What matters here is the floor plan. Jupiter holds the soldiers who fell partway, but above the planets, above even Aravoth, there's a level that doesn't hold beings at all. It holds machinery. And it has a name that almost nobody outside Slavonic manuscript scholars has ever heard. Number 7. Muzaloth. The 8th heaven has a name you've almost certainly never heard. Muzaloth. It appears only in the longer recension of 2 Enoch, the more detailed version of the text that survives in a subset of the Slavonic manuscripts. And what it describes is not a place where beings live, it's a control system. The text calls Muzaloth the changer of seasons, of drought and rain. That's the description. No angels singing, no creatures with 12 wings, no prisoners in chains, just a mechanism. The 8th heaven governs Earth's weather and seasonal cycles, and it does this through the 12 constellations of the firmament that are housed at this level. Think about what that means inside the system 2 Enoch has been building. For 7 planets, every level has been populated. Angels governing stars on the moon, chained rebels on Venus, paradise and punishment on Mars, Phoenixes and Chalkidri pulling the sun on the sun's own level, silent Grigori on Jupiter, archangels and record keepers on Mercury, the fiery throne room in Aravoth, and then you get to Muzaloth, and it's a thermostat, no inhabitants described. No drama, just the machinery that decides whether it rains on Earth this month or doesn't. The 12 constellations at this level are not decorative. The text treats them as functional components of the weather system, each constellation governing a portion of the year, each one linked to drought or rain patterns that play out on Earth's surface. This is not astrology in the horoscope sense. This is not Mercury is in retrograde so your relationships are complicated. This is administration. Muzaloth is the department that runs the seasons, and the constellations are its instruments. And the timing of how this idea traveled through history is almost too perfect. The concept of celestial spheres, governing earthly weather, was central to medieval European cosmology. The idea that the stars and constellations had direct physical effects on weather, agriculture, and human health was medical and scientific orthodoxy from the Roman period through the Renaissance. Doctors prescribed treatments based on planetary positions. Farmers planted by astrological calendars. Universities taught celestial influence as physics, not superstition. The entire framework of celestial governance over terrestrial events, which modern science dismisses as pre-scientific thinking, is described in 2 Enoch not as belief, but as engineering. The 8th heaven doesn't influence the weather. It administers the weather. There's a real difference. One means the stars have some effect on rainfall. The other means someone is sitting at a control panel deciding when it rains. That difference matters because it changes how you read every seasonal reference in the Hebrew Bible. The Book of Job describes God as the one who brings forth Mazzaroth in its season. Mazzaroth, Muzaloth. The words are cognates, both deriving from a Hebrew root referring to the constellations and their seasonal governance. Job chapter 38, verse 32. The same concept, the same name, appearing in a canonical biblical text, and in this Slavonic pseudepigraphal text, connected by a linguistic root that means constellations or zodiac stations. Whether 2 Enoch borrowed from Job or both drew from a common older tradition, the idea of a constellation-driven season control mechanism runs deeper in the Hebrew textual world than most readers realize. Here's what sits underneath the mechanical description. If Muzaloth is real in the terms this text uses, if the 8th heaven actually administers Earth's seasons through 12 constellation-based controls, then every drought, every flood, every failed harvest, every famine in human history was not random. It was scheduled, administered from a level of the cosmos that humans cannot access, using instruments humans cannot see, on a timetable that the text says was established before the world began. Rain isn't random weather in this system. Rain is scheduled, administered, decided by someone above you on a timetable you can't see. And Muzaloth is not the only infrastructure heaven. It's the lower half of a 2-part system. The 8th heaven changes the seasons. The 9th heaven, one level above it, stores the blueprints that Muzaloth reads from. The 8th heaven is the machine. The 9th heaven is the instruction manual. And the 2 names, Muzaloth and Cuchaveim, appear together in the longer recension as a matched pair, 2 levels of the same administrative function, separated by 1 floor. The longer recension of 2 Enoch, the version that contains these names, survives in fewer manuscripts than the shorter version. The debate over these 2 versions has been going on for over a century. One side says the longer version is an expansion by later copyists who added material. The other side says the shorter version is an abridgment that cut material the original contained. The debate is unresolved. What's clear is that whoever wrote the Muzaloth passage understood the Hebrew Bible's constellation terminology and built a cosmological layer around it that no other surviving text describes in this level of mechanical detail. If the idea that your weather has an engineer behind it changes how you read the rest of this system, subscribe, because the level directly above Muzaloth is where the engineering plans are stored. By the time Enoch reaches the 9th heaven, the cosmos has shifted from drama to infrastructure. The beings are behind him. What's ahead is the operating system itself. Number 8. Cuchaveim. The 9th heaven is called Cuchaveim, and the text describes it in even fewer words than Muzaloth. It contains the heavenly homes of the 12 constellations of the circle of the firmament. That's it. 1 sentence. The heavenly homes. But that's not a typo, by the way. The text really does say homes, not positions, not orbits. not mathematical coordinates. Homes. As if the 12 constellations of the zodiac are not patterns drawn by human imagination onto random stars, but residents. Beings or structures that have addresses in the ninth heaven, each one occupying its own designated space. Cuchaveim sits one level above Muzaloth, and the relationship between the two heavens is functional. Muzaloth changes the seasons through the 12 constellations. Cuchaveim houses those same 12 constellations. The 8th heaven is the execution layer. The 9th heaven is the storage layer. Muzaloth runs the program. Cuchaveim holds the code. If you've ever seen a system where the control room is on one floor and the server room is on the floor above it, that's the architecture 2 Enoch describes for heavens 8 and 9. The word Cuchaveim itself comes from Hebrew. Cuchaveim means stars in biblical Hebrew, and it appears throughout the Hebrew Bible as the standard word for the visible stars. But in 2 Enoch, Cuchaveim doesn't refer to the stars in general. It refers specifically to the zodiac constellations, the 12 stations that the sun appears to pass through over the course of a year. These 12 stations govern the calendar, and in the system 2 Enoch describes, they also govern the seasons, the weather, and the flow of time on Earth. The zodiac in the ancient Near East was not entertainment. It was infrastructure. The Babylonians developed the 12-sign zodiac around the 5th century BCE as a way to standardize astronomical prediction. The 12 signs divided the ecliptic, the sun's apparent annual path, into equal segments, and each segment was associated with a constellation. The system spread to Greece, to Egypt, to Rome, and eventually to the entire Western world. But in every one of those traditions, the zodiac is described as a human observation. Humans noticed the patterns. Humans named them. Humans built calendars around them. 2 Enoch says no. Humans didn't invent the zodiac by looking up and naming what they saw. The zodiac is a physical structure in the ninth heaven that was already there. The constellations have homes. They were placed there. The pattern humans see from Earth is the underside of an engineering project that was built at a level humans cannot reach. You're not reading the sky. You're reading the bottom of a floor. That claim, if you take it on its own terms, inverts 4,000 years of astronomy. Every civilization that built a calendar on the zodiac, every culture that tracked the seasons by the constellations, every farmer who planted by the stars was not doing astronomy. They were, in the text's framing, reading the output of a machine they didn't know existed, the same way you can check the time on a clock face without knowing anything about the gears behind it. Cuchaveim and Muzaloth together represent something no other ancient cosmological text describes. Other traditions have celestial spheres. Other traditions assign influence to the constellations. But no other surviving text from the ancient world describes a two-tier administrative system where one level stores the constellations and the level below it executes their seasonal functions. The Ptolemaic model has nested spheres, but they're a geometrical solution to observed planetary motion, not an administrative hierarchy. The Aristotelian cosmos has an unmoved mover, but it operates by desire, not by engineering. 2 Enoch's 8th and 9th heavens describe a system that runs on stored information executed through physical mechanisms. That's not theology, that's architecture. The text doesn't describe who maintains Cuchaveim. No angels are named at this level, no creatures inhabit it. The constellations live there, and that's all the text says. Whether the constellations themselves are alive, whether they're structures or beings, the text leaves ambiguous. They have homes. They govern the calendar. They are above the machine that changes the seasons, and they sit one level below God. But the text wasn't done yet, not even close. The 6th planet in the system, Mercury, is where the operators live. And what those operators are keeping track of is every single thing that happens on Earth. Number 9. Mercury. The 6th heaven in 2 Enoch is where the record keepers work. 7 distinct groups of angels occupy this level, and their job description covers everything from stellar mechanics to human surveillance. They govern the motions of the stars. They oversee and manage the governments of Earth. And they keep records of every person's deeds, good and bad, written down and stored. Every deed, every act, recorded. And according to this text, the records never stop. Mercury sits on the 6th heavenly circle. Hermes, the Slavonic rendering of Hermes, the Greek god of messengers, travelers, and, critically, the inventor of writing. In Greek mythology, Hermes created the alphabet. He invented the lyre. He was the god who carried messages between the divine and human worlds, the one figure in the Greek pantheon whose primary function was communication and record-keeping. And 2 Enoch maps that planet to the heaven where angels write down everything that happens on Earth. That naming is almost too precise. The planet named for the god who invented writing assigned to the heavens staffed by beings whose primary function is writing. Whether the first-century author who assembled 2 Enoch intended that parallel, or whether the parallel emerged naturally from the Greek astronomical naming conventions the text borrowed, the result is the same. Mercury is the archive planet. The 7 groups of angels at this level are not all doing the same thing. The text describes separate functions. Some govern the courses of the stars, keeping the celestial mechanics running. Some oversee the natural world, managing the cycles of plants, animals, and ecological systems. Some watch human governments and track the political activity of nations. And some keep the moral records, cataloging every act of every person, compiling what amounts to a comprehensive surveillance database that is maintained in real time and stored at the 6th level of the cosmos. There's a reason this story is still talked about today. The concept of a cosmic record, a complete accounting of human deeds maintained by angels and presented at judgment, runs through the entire Abrahamic tradition. Islam calls them the Kiraman Katibin, the noble scribers, 2 angels assigned to every person, one recording good deeds on the right shoulder and one recording bad deeds on the left. Christianity describes the Book of Life in Revelation. Judaism has the concept of the Sefer, the book in which deeds are inscribed, referenced in the High Holy Day liturgy. All 3 traditions share the architecture of celestial record-keeping, and 2 Enoch describes the physical location where that operation runs, the planet Mercury. But Mercury isn't only a filing room. The text also places 6 phoenixes, 6 cherubim, and 6 winged seraphim at this level, all singing in one voice. The same phoenixes that appear on the Sun pulling the solar chariot appear here on Mercury in a different capacity, as part of the angelic administration rather than the solar mechanics team. If the phoenixes on the Sun are the field workers, the phoenixes on Mercury are the management. Same species, different department, different planet. The seraphim at this level are described with 6 wings each, matching the description in Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah sees seraphim standing above God's throne with 2 wings covering their faces, 2 covering their feet, and 2 for flying. But in 2 Enoch, the seraphim are on Mercury, not in Aravoth where God's throne is. They're stationed with the record keepers, not with the executive. Their song on this planet is described as unified, all voices synchronized, producing a sound the text treats as part of the administrative function rather than pure worship. The singing on Mercury isn't worship in the way you'd expect. The text treats it as part of the administrative operation, like the sound the system makes when it's running. Here's what makes Mercury the most unsettling planet in the system. Every other planet has a function that operates at cosmic scale. The moon manages the weather. The sun runs the solar chariot. Muzaloth controls the seasons. But Mercury watches people, individual people. Your acts, your choices, your deeds, tracked by name, recorded without interruption, stored on a planet you cannot reach, by beings you cannot negotiate with. Every other planet in the system runs some piece of cosmic infrastructure. Mercury is the one watching you. And somehow, it gets worse. Because the nearest planet, the one closest to Earth, the one right above your head, the moon, is not empty. It's staffed. 200 angels run it. And what they're running starts directly above where you're standing right now. Number 10, the moon. The first heaven, the lowest level, the one closest to Earth. And according to 2 Enoch, it is right above the visible sky, separated from the world you live in by nothing more than the firmament itself. 200 angels govern the stars from this level, not symbolically, not in a general sense. 200 specific angels assigned to specific stars, managing their positions, their movements, and their operations from the planet the text places closer to Earth than any other body in the cosmic architecture. The moon sits on the 7th heavenly circle, the innermost and lowest ring in 2 Enoch's planetary system. It is the smallest orbit, the nearest planet, the first thing Enoch encounters when he ascends. And this planet is not a quiet observation deck. It is a working floor. The text describes storehouses. Multiple storehouses, each dedicated to a specific element of Earth's weather system. Treasure houses of snow. The text says, and the angels who keep their terrible storehouses, and the clouds whence they come out, and into which they go. That's 2 Enoch chapter 5 verse 1. A warehouse for snow, angels managing it. Clouds entering and exiting on a schedule. This is not poetry about winter, this is logistics. Then the text describes another storehouse. Treasure house of the dew, like oil of the olive, and the appearance of its form, as of all the flowers of the earth. Chapter 6, verse 1. The morning dew on the grass in this system is not condensation. It is a product. Stored in the first heaven, dispensed by angels, released on a timetable coordinated with the constellation-driven controls in Muzaloth, 200 levels above. The dew that sits on your lawn at sunrise was, according to this text, manufactured. The moon's first heaven is the distribution center. Snow, ice, clouds, dew, all stored, all managed, all released by angelic staff. And the staff numbers are specific. 200 angels governing the stars. Additional angels managing the weather storehouses. The text doesn't give a total head count for the first heaven, but it gives enough detail to establish that this level operates continuously, managing both astronomical positions and atmospheric output around the clock. Here's what makes this the right place to end. The moon is the nearest planet. Every other level in this system, the phoenixes on the sun, the prisoners on Venus, the split paradise and punishment on Mars, the silent Grigori on Jupiter, the throne room in Aravoth, the constellation machines in Muzaloth and Cuchaveim, the record keepers on Mercury, all of it sits above the moon. And the moon sits above you. The text doesn't describe the distance between the moon's heaven and Earth's surface. It doesn't give a measurement in miles or parasangs or any other unit. It simply places this planet as the first thing above the firmament, the boundary between the terrestrial world and the cosmic architecture. In the system 2 Enoch describes, the nearest active installation, the one with 200 angel operators running weather logistics, is directly overhead. The moon is what you see when you look at it. The planet's heaven is what you don't see behind it. Those 900 measure creatures pulling the sun across the sky are 4 levels above us. The angels who manufactured this morning's dew are on level 1, right here. 10 planets, 7 planetary circles with Greek names, creatures that pull the Sunday prisoners who beg a human for mercy, a tree whose roots feed Eden from 3 planets up, giant soldiers standing in voluntary silence, a season machine, a zodiac filing cabinet, a surveillance planet that records every act, and a weather warehouse on the nearest planet, right above your head, staffed and operational. All of it was written down almost 2,000 years ago in a text no biblical canon ever accepted, surviving in over 20 Slavonic manuscripts that nobody outside specialist circles has read. Tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you want to see what other ancient texts describe when they map the sky.